Championship. Today is the final day, and we're just waiting a few moments for the semi-final round to start.
We've been joined by two experts. I would let them introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Matthias Berg from Germany. I've played this tournament and the 19 tournaments before. I commented last year and I'm happy to comment this year again.
Matthias is the next semi-finalist. Came second. An ex-finalist, sorry, and semi-finalist. But
my name is Mirek Voracek. I've come from the Czech Republic. I've played in quite some World of Hell Championships, around 15. And last year we had the World of Hell Championship in Prague, so I was a tournament director, just like this year in Japan.
So, the players are just setting up in the room at the moment, and what I will be doing right now is just running through what we will be covering here today, and also what you can find on other streams elsewhere, and what's basically going to be happening. So, first of all, we have the men's semi-finals. And we've just been informed of the colours that are going to be played. The first semi-final is Yusuke Takanashi versus Tetsu-SATANI. Takanashi will be playing black. And that is the main coverage that we'll be doing during this session. We will have the second semi-final available should we want to jump across to it and have a quick look at that on occasions. And that is between Akihiro Takahashi and Yan Song. So if I keep pausing, it's because they're shaking hands over the board and it looks like they're going to start, and I'll come back to this once we've had a brief look at the openings. I will keep talking, but once they start, they had a handshake, so they've actually got up to get some water and stuff now. So I'll carry on, but we will cut to them as soon as they start playing, and then we'll come back to see afterwards. So Takanashi won the Swiss part of the tournament with 11 wins out of 13. Tetsu-SATANI was fourth, and that's why the two of them are playing. He actually got 9.5 wins out of 13 during the Swiss part of the tournament. He was actually, I'll use the word lucky, not much luck involved, but he actually needed to go into a playoff against Chung from Taiwan, who drew his final game with Nicky van den Bigelaar, and so he was very unlucky not to make it into the semi-finals. The final 2 years ago was actually between Takanashi and Takahashi, and that could be a repeat. If each of them win their semi-finals, then they could be making up the final again this year. The semi-finals, well, I'll let you explain, Mirek, in a second what the format of the semi-finals will be, but I'll just run through the women's semi-finals as well. There's Joanna William from Australia. She came first in the Swiss part of the tournament with 8 out of 13, and she is playing Chunai Lee from Korea, who got 7. Then in the second semi-final we've got Zhen Dong, who also got 8 out of 13 from China, and Velma Fu, and I'm not sure where she's from.
China.
She's from China as well. So an all Chinese semi-final there. Notice quite significantly, it's rare that we get the semi-finals without a Japanese player. In fact, in the men's tournament, we've got 3 out of the 4 semi-finalists as a Japanese player. But in the women's tournament, there is no Japanese player this year. Ayumi Norimitsu missed out by 6 discs on reaching the semi-finals. So that was exciting. There will be no junior semi-finals or finals or anything like that, because Takahashi, who is in the men's semi-finals, is also qualifies as a junior, so he automatically becomes the champion because he can't play the men's semi-finals and a junior playoff for the final as well. But just to run through the junior champions, so Takahashi is the champion. Second was his young compatriot Kenta Yakushiji. He came second in the Swiss part of the tournament, and therefore second in the junior championships. And then Israel, who have started to show themselves as the best of the rest in the recent tournaments for the junior players. Sheikh Shah Alpha came third last year and third this year, and Mickey Schiffman had a good showing last year and came fourth this year. Then the Team World Championships, Japan, without any surprise there, won with 31 points, and equal second were China and Taiwan. China took second spot on the tiebreak. They each got 26 points. So I'm just going to ask Mirek now to fill us in on how the semi-finals are actually working, so that you know what to be looking for.
The semifinals, both of them, semifinal 1 and 2 we call them, they are both played for best of 3 games. So if any player wins the game number 1 and game number 2, it's over, he going to the final match. If one player wins first game and the other player wins the second game, we are going to have the decisive game number 3 in the semi-final. If the decisive game number 3 is going to happen or is not going to happen, we will only know after the first 2 games are played. So we had different cases each year. A game could end up in a draw. If any game ends up with a draw 32-32, there is certainly going to be the third decisive game.
Okay, so who chooses the colour in the third game if it does go to a third game?
The person who's better out of the 2 games. So we have the discount, and we know which player receives more discs from the first 2 games.
Okay, and just whilst they're setting up, given that you're here, Mirek, have you got any stories, anything interesting that's happened as tournament director during this tournament compared to last year?
Pretty much the most interesting fact is that there was almost nothing interesting this year. So quite surprisingly to us, the tournament ran very smoothly. We had few issues during the play that we could solve on the spot without any delay or without any break in the tournament, and we had only one on day 1. We had only one issue that prolonged one round by about 15 minutes because we had difficult situation to discuss among the tournament direction.
And the game has just started, so we're going to just watch them play the opening, and then we'll get into commenting on the game. We are actually also following this game on an analysis board that we will be able to show you. The analysis board will appear beside the main board, the main camera, so that you will be able to see what is actually happening on the actual board as we use the analysis. We will try to show the analysis board when we have something interesting to say, rather than all the time, and we will try our hardest not to allow the analysis where we are able to look ahead on an actual board to affect the comments that we make. We'll try not to go off on huge tangents of games that aren't happening, because we all get quite excited when we spot something.
I'll just make a quick note to the opening. This is something completely different than we had in round 10, I believe, when Takanashi played Satani in the regular tournament. Takanashi was black, just like now, but he's changed the opening in move 3 or 5, I think. Even in move 3, yes, he's changed the opening in move 3, so they're playing something completely different. The interesting thing is that round 10 was the round when both pairs of players, of semifinalists, met. So we had Takanashi playing Satani, and we also had Takahashi playing Yen Song. And actually, if we can assume from round 10, Takanashi, the black player on table 1, and Takahashi, the black player on table 2, they both won their game, so they are the favorites for the semifinals.
Do we have any idea how much these two players play each other, given that they're both from the same nation?
I'm not sure if we have statistics on how many games they played each other, but Takanashi Yusuke, he's played about 250 or 60 tournaments.
This year?
No, overall.
I'm going to say, in his sleep.
Most of them in Japan. And as Tetsu-SATANI is one of the top players, then they certainly meet quite often.
And the game's now settled down, so that's normally an indication that the players have not necessarily reached the end of their book, but certainly reached the end of the part that they're comfortable playing quickly. They've actually gone quite a long way into the game with their opening knowledge and their knowledge of each other's play. And I'm going to ask Matthias to comment on the position.
Yeah, I just checked the thought database and I saw that before this last move there were only 4 or 5 games and all of them were played by a computer versus Takuchi Kashiwabara, and that is like 19 years ago. So this is a new position, not only for one of the players. I think the other player prepared. Yusuke played the another good move that the program has not played before, at least as we can see in the thought database. So it's quite difficult for White to find the correct move, I guess. White would like that Black will turn the e3 disc, but that would require White to play into the south. And there's like only 2 moves in the south, and yep, he's choosing one of them. The other one was obviously bad. I wonder if we will see G. Nope, he's prepared for that.
So now we're in a position where one of them knows what he's doing and has looked at this and prepared it for this game, and the other one is having to think. So that sometimes can make a difference on the clock. Although one thing to say about the clocks actually is in the finals, in the semi-finals they get 35 minutes each, and then in the final they get 40 minutes each.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
so extra thinking time to prepare those special moves.
Is that more than they get in the Swiss part of the round?
Yeah, in the Swiss part of the round it's 30 minutes each player.
The interesting part about this position is that Black is kind of setting himself up for Stoner Trap, but I guess Black already knows that the Stoner Trap won't happen in this case, but usually you don't want to have a situation where you have 4 discs on the side with connecting to the corner, and then for example, if the D4 disc becomes black, then White can play.
Do you want to show it on the analysis?
I could.
Yeah.
Can we switch on the analysis?
This is
It's on.
so. For example, We need to go back one move. So if black would flip that disc d4, then white can play this move, and if black tries to get access to the diagonal, then white will play a stoner trap. Black actually will get the a1 corner, but white will get the side and the b8 corner.
Okay, so yeah, so with a stoner trap, the idea is that one player has an edge that's sticking out in one direction, and the other person can take advantage of it if they don't flip, in this case, down the B column. And the way that happens is they would play B2, taking the diagonal, the main diagonal from B2 down to F6, and that means that in this case black would not be able to take the A1 corner immediately, and because white won't have flipped along the B column, white will then be able to play A3, forcing either being able to take the A8 corner next move, and the only way that black can stop it is to take A2, but that will then flip B2 and allow white to take the A1 corner and then the A8 corner. So it leaves a very difficult choice for black, and normally it normally works out very well for the person who is playing the stoner trap.
Now we have a equally interesting situation on the board, I think, because basically the opposite of what you were discussing just happened.
Right.
Black, not white, but black took the entire diagonal, A1, H8 diagonal, and well, it's not a stoner trap at all, but still black is playing, I would say, pressing very hard on white, because he's just not giving many options to play to white. So white moves are very limited to, I think, two or three options that he has. Right now in the position there is the move to G6 for white that looks reasonable. There is a move to C1 that looks reasonable, and possibly there could be a move to B1. That's about it.
G5
And A3.
And G5, yes, thank you very much. G5 is very reasonable. A3 would be quickly replied with A2, and
But it does get access on the diagonal.
But
So
white, yes.
the reason that black doesn't mind playing right next to the corner, by the way, is because if white does manage to get on that diagonal and take the H8 corner, black has the wedge at E8. So the black discs will be wedged in between the white corner and the white discs that are already on the bottom edge, and those black discs can't be taken, and black will be able to take the A8 corner. So he doesn't mind too much playing down next to the corner, whereas normally, obviously, a basic idea is that you try not to give the corners away. If you can get enough back for yourself by giving a corner away, it's called a sacrifice, and that's what's happened here.
And it's a prepared sacrifice.
It's a prepared sacrifice.
Because Yusuke just plays his moves immediately. He spent about 1 minute 45 seconds on all this we've seen. And Tetsu is considering his moves quite hard.
One thing to actually point out to anybody watching this, the clocks, the video on the clocks at the top is actually the wrong way round. So Takanashi's clock is on the right hand side and Satani's is on the left. So if you see the right hand clock ticking, it means it's Takanashi's move.
The disadvantage of the C1 was that it flips C6 and C7, so it cuts off the access for white to play B7 at some point.
Just show that on the analysis.
Let's go there.
So white can no longer play on B7. So if black ever gets to play the wedge e8 and then later takes the corner, white cannot even play b7 to keep some of the discs.
Although if white plays out the a3, a2 pair before that, then he gets access back
So
into...
if black
so
plays just anything, white takes the corner, black gets the wedge, white plays anything, black takes the corner, then this square is critical because white has no access to b7.
Yeah. And he did play that move, the anything move.
Correct. And black just played the anything move. It looks reasonable, yeah. But it seems that black is not worried about a1 h8 diagonal anymore, and maybe he doesn't have to be worried for the reasons we just showed. Now Tetsu is back into his deep thoughts. Oh,
not that deep.
not that. Could be that. Could it be that he's just pretending to think deep, and in fact he knows all the game by heart, knows how it's going to finish.
Double bluffing. Well, I was talking to Takahashi yesterday or the day before about his game with Takanashi, and Takahashi said that he was aware of Takanashi's clock running down, and he deliberately played moves to make him think rather than what he considered to be the best moves. And Takanashi didn't have time to think, and he lost on the board, but with 3 seconds left on the clock, showing that maybe he hadn't put in the thought that was required at that point in the game.
If you want to see that interview, it's posted on our YouTube channel, and it was after round 10 that we did that interview on day 1. So you can go and check out what he talks about, his strategy about the clock and the timing in that game.
Round 10 on day 1.
It was after round 10.
In that case,
so that
day
would be
2.
day 2.
Could we just flip to the other semi-final, just to show the board and allow people to have a quick glance? Are we up there? Okay. Just to remind you that Akihiro Takahashi is black and Yan Song from China is white in this position. It looks like a fairly even position, 2-wall game. Both players trying hard to create the situation where the other has to play through their wall first, and in such a way that it gives them responses. But we'll keep an eye on that for you, and we'll cut across occasionally if anything interesting happens. Thank you. Go back to the main board.
Now it seems that Yusuke Takanashi, who's thinking hard, is out of his preparation. Could be, and I wanted to remind ourselves a game that happened in round, I think 7. Yes, no, in round 6. There's a game that happened. It was Yus-SATANI playing a game against Chun Wan Lee from Hong Kong. Chun Wan Lee was the player he beat in the playoffs, first of all, and I believe Chun Wan Lee was in the semi-finalist last year, or the year before.
No.
Was it? Wan Lee was the semi-finalist last year or the year before?
I don't think so.
Possible?
I don't think so.
In any case, in that game I want to talk about, game round 6, it was Tetsu was black and Chun was white, and this game was also live on Live Othello, so you could see it, and pretty much all the moves of the game happened in few minutes. So it took about 5-6 minutes, and there were just 9 empty squares on the board. when Tetsu had a deep thought of about 10 minutes, made 2 more moves, and then he had another deep thought of about another 10 minutes, and the game ended in a draw. Both players just admitted later after the game that it was a dead draw, that they both knew they had a drawing line and they were heading for a 32-32 result, and the only reason why they spent some time thinking was to recall it from their memory, how actually the line goes. So that's one of the proofs that Tetsu-SATANI knows a lot of the theory and the openings, and could be well prepared.
So, as Benzili pointed out on the live Othello, an interesting idea is now that Black will sacrifice the south corner, south edge, by playing e8, and then White takes h8, and Black tries to get parity in that region. Maybe we can show it on the board.
That's interesting.
So Black plays e8, White take the corner, and now it would be White's turn, and there's very limited options for White to play.
And so then, if that pair was played out, it would go white-black in some
White,
order.
Black.
And then White has to find a move and has really only got one that doesn't completely die. And then Black has all the control and sits back and has a look at the game and says, how can I win from here?
Like this?
Like that.
Okay, undo.
I would say e8, guys, is the move you should not try to do at home normally.
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous. So if anyone's watching who's not very high rated in Othello, then probably you're not even considering this e8 move, because it looks just completely crazy. It's mad. It gives up the corner. It gives up the entire edge in the south. It's just never even give it a thought. But
as we said, sometimes you can do what appear to be bad moves, but if you get more from it than you give up, it's worth it. And this is one of those occasions.
And before this game, I had a look at Takanashi Tetsu-SATANI game from round 10 from the regular tournament, where a completely different thing happened, but I would still recommend that game. Go to the live results, round 10, and check that game. In the end game, Yusuke Takanashi being Black, he turned what looked like a pretty blank end game where he had no chances. By some nice sacrifices, he turned it into a winning game because he used the White weakness, he got the parity on his side, and he was just able to turn the whole game round. And this move, this crazy move e8, might be one of such moments where he turns the whole game round.
The other thing about e8 move is, because it limits all the options, it becomes very easy to look ahead. Because if your opponent has lots of options, then you need to look at every move that they play and every move that you could play after that, and then every move and the tree grows very, very quickly. If you get into a position where you can limit your opponent's moves, then you can predict exactly what they're going to do because they don't have any option, and it means you only have one tree to look down, their forced move on each go and your choice on each go. And so you can look very, very deeply, and it allows you to analyze sometimes to the point where you can completely get to an absolutely dominating position and you know the game's won. So there are advantages also, I mean, to the e8 move anyway. But yeah, normally don't Don't do it with out of hand. I also just want to say we actually feel very lucky this year because the original location for the World Championships was going to be in Hong Kong. This was cancelled just weeks ago, and the organisers have done an absolutely fantastic job of rearranging everything within a few weeks. And we just, whilst we're here, say a big thank you to everybody who's been involved in sorting that out. We feel very lucky that you had that commitment, so thank you.
Now Takanashi is taking lots of this time, and I guess Tetsu won't even need so much time because his moves might be forced for a while.
What are the other options if he doesn't decide to go for?
E2 is obviously one. E2 might be followed by D1, and the problem is that you can't play the sequence we are talking about now afterwards because you also give access to the G3 again, so G4, yeah. So
So now it doesn't seem to be forced position.
no.
And if after E1, D1, E2, D1, if Black just decides not to sacrifice, keeps on doing, for example, E1.
Maybe he has access to these squares now, so maybe something like that could be interesting. But yeah.
You're
Not
getting
let's-
hypothetical on
yes.
the position
Yes.
that you're now seeing on the analysis.
Yeah.
So
Did you want to take a look at game 2 to see what's happening there?
yeah, let's do that. Are we on? Yeah. Okay, so anybody want to comment on?
Wow. So white has limited options, but move like B2 is promising because black is likely to, I think, lose parity at least in one of the two regions after black gets A1.
So in general, in this position, white is very short of moves. Black's grabbed an edge on the left-hand side, and white has just got a big wall that white is not able to play anywhere on the right-hand side of the board. Black also has a very quiet move at F2, just flipping one disc totally internally, and that's going to be coming soon, depending on what happens around it, but it's there. But at the same time, whilst white doesn't have any moves on the right-hand side of the board, and the moves that he has on the left-hand side of the board aren't all bad. There's good things that he can do. So that even if he has to give up a corner, he can probably find a way to do it such that it's not too bad for him and he gets a decent sacrifice.
Yeah, but there are more options to think about for white. White could play to the north, like D1, or to the west, B2. No, A2. Okay.
And on the main board, we'll come back to this game a bit later, but back on the main board, nothing's happened, but Tetsu-SATANI is having a long think now.
It's Yusuke. Yusuke thinking.
Oh yeah,
having
sorry,
one
the
clock.
clocks are the wrong way round.
Clocks
Yeah.
are switched, and also Yusuke is, I would say, almost famous for having long thoughts.
Yeah.
So if this is happening in the mid game, then I assume Yusuke is going to finish with something between 30 seconds and 1 minute 30 seconds on his clock in the end game.
Do you think he's considering the E8 move?
I don't understand what else he could be considering for so long. The one option is that he was considering the E8 move and then just decided not to do that for some reason,
Well-
and now he's just searching for other options. What could be possible?
Okay, so one thing I'll point out here or ask the question. E8 was suggested by Ben Seeley, who's watching from, I assume, the US. So Ben Seeley's a two-time world champion who sadly isn't with us this year. And so when he speaks, we listen. And I just asked the question, did anybody else spot the E8 move before Ben pointed it out? Because it's because of all the reasons that you gave, Mirek, of like, don't try this at home. It's the sort of move that you might not even register. I hadn't spotted it, and so I'm. Oh, he's gone it. He's done it. He's done it.
I understand.
I usually wouldn't go for it quickly, but I think I would consider it. But then it's so risky and it's so much effort to think ahead if this is really what you want, that I'm likely to not play it.
Just the advice is consider all the possible moves. I mean, beginners are advised not to go to X squares, not to go close to the corners. They are advised not to do some things. Even experts, they switch off some squares on the board just to simplify the thinking. They keep in mind that A1, A2, B2, B7, E8 squares are simply off, unavailable, so that their thinking is a little bit simpler. But just try to come back if you have time, and most people have time during their game, during the half an hour. Just try to come back for every single possible move, at least for 1 second.
Right, so you're saying some moves look so obviously wrong that players don't look at them, when in fact occasionally those obviously wrong moves turn out to be good, but you actually have to look at it to notice it. So it's worth spending a second, just cursory glance at every single move, just to make sure you're not missing something and you've not dismissed it out of hand.
Exactly. And also the other way around, you have some moves where your opponent would never ever play because it's a complete resignation. But the situation changes so fast that after one of your hastened reply, he might just go there and you find out that it was good at that time.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and the reason why a move is bad can change as well. So if you looked at a move at one point in the game and you decide it's bad, and then you carry on playing the game and you don't look at it again because you've already decided it's bad, the game changes and it's worth looking at again each time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, the game changes after every move. Each of them. Now, if we go to the analysis board for a second. So, remember a few moves back, Matthias just pointed out that these discs, C6 and C7, were turned white after playing C1. So, something changed on the board, very, very far from the move played on C1. And Matthias gave a nice explanation how it might affect the entire bottom edge of the game. Can go back to the real game.
If you're watching this on YouTube and you've got any questions, just type them in and they will get through to us one way or another. And we will do our best to answer them.
Now if white should choose between the h6 and h7 moves, how should he choose?
I think he's also considering to not play either of them, but usually you would just pick the one that is closer to your corner because then it's already stable. So if white plays h7, then he has at least 2 more discs that are stable. That means they won't change anymore in the game.
So essentially, white has got 3 moves that he can play here. A2 and h6 and h7. h6 and h7 are just a pair, and black will follow in immediately. Do you think for both of those?
Unless you want to consider a3, a2, b2, and just hope for parity in the end.
Yeah, that gives up an awful lot of discs.
It does.
So by parity, what we mean is, as the game develops, you'll find that certain areas of the board get closed off. So in the bottom right-hand corner at the moment, there's 2 spaces. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's 2 spaces. Ideally, what you want is your opponent to have to play into each of those first and you to take the following move. That way you get discs at the end of the game that don't get flipped back. If you make the last move, the discs can't get flipped back. So there's global parity, the last move of the game, and then there's local parity where you've got individual areas like this. Because white goes second in the game, it means that normally by the end of the game, white gets the last move. And those discs associated with that last move. And that can be incredibly powerful. It's difficult to explain how powerful parity is to someone who's just learning the game. But what black tries to do in the game is make parity less effective. And so one way in this game, for example, one way in which black can make parity less effective for white is to completely run white out of moves and therefore force white to play where white doesn't want to play, and black gets the last move in each of those regions anyway. And so that's what Takanashi is now looking to do. Completely run white out of good moves, so white has to play immediately bad moves. I'm also thinking that in this position, white might just think about doing a2 now, because if black plays a move where white can then play h7, h6 could be flipping other discs. But it's not clear to see. Well, it's not clear to me.
Actually, I think he's thinking about a2 or a3, because if you go to the analysis board, after a2, the lines look like b7.
Nope.
And that's not possible.
Well, it's possible, but it's not a good idea, because white can just take it and black doesn't have the wedge. So black would need to get access to that wedge first by playing e2, and then he could do something like that.
And that is what I meant. Like, it opens up the possibility of doing h7, and h6 now flips diagonally as well. I'm not saying black would play h6, but
It leaves a hole here for black. If we don't do h7, so we play the d1, for example, or maybe even e1 looks nice.
try to avoid saying here, because people can't see what you're pointing at.
Right. So E1 or D1, let's say something. Now black has the access to B7. White would probably
Yeah.
take A3, play A3 to give up the A1 corner, and white's inside. Now it's black's turn, and this position is black's turn, and looks like whatever he plays, white still keeps the parity, and white will still have the second second move.
That's not true, because it will happen like this. What? We are getting too far into the game, because now it's not parity anymore.
Oh, that's a very false window.
That's fine. You saw that before. So, so just go back to that position, just to
This one?
no, the one that Matthias said. I mean, he saw. So I'm willing to look at it.
Go forward.
No,
or
forward,
back?
forward.
Forward.
I want to explain what actually happened. So
No.
the idea is that in this analysis, white is playing so that he has to give up quite a lot, but he maintains parity that we talked about a second ago at the end of the game. And this principle can apply whether it's this line or not. But when black makes the next move at E1, white doesn't have access anywhere. Therefore, white passes. Therefore, black gets the last move of the game. And that's what we mean by black trying to negate the parity. Okay, so we've just had a move from Takanashi. So if we switch the analysis off,
We have moved from both, so we know he's played A2 and E1, as we expected.
Just a few quick comments from the YouTube stream. So just to confirm, the clocks are inverted right now, if that's confusing for anyone who's just joining now. So when you're looking at the clocks, they are just switched around. And also, can I get a refresher on who's playing in the ladies' semifinals?
yes. The first semi-final is the Australian Joanna William versus Chunai Lee from Korea. The second women's semi-final is Zheng Dong from China and Velma Fu from
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
I'm going to write it down this time. From Hong Kong. So it's nice to have someone who's not from...
We're going to have the women's semifinals just next game. So together with the second games of the main semifinals, we're going to have the women's semifinals as well. But unlike the main semifinals, the women's semifinals are played one game only. So it's just one game, and the winner goes to the finals.
Also, just to let you know that the Takahashi game is actually being analysed also on a separate stream. So if you wanted to keep an eye on that one, you can open a new window as well. And where we in the studio will be looking at one game, whatever other games are being played at the same time, other semi-finals and that kind of thing, they will be on separate streams. So you can go and check what's happening in those games as well. So Jen, this is your first World Championships on the media team. Have you learned anything about the game? Because you don't actually play yourself, do you?
I don't play myself, so I've been given some tips from some of the best players in the world, and so I'm hoping that maybe I might be able to beat my dad now, but that's about as far as my Othello aspirations have extended from being here at the World Championship. It's been really amazing to be able to see the amount of strategy and thought that goes into all of these games, and also to get a chance to chat with the players and hear why they love playing Othello, and it's been a really great time for me. But I wouldn't say my Othello game has really advanced very much yet. But I think Guy might want to try and challenge me to a game later and see.
Happy to. Happy to.
Which will probably be a huge embarrassment for me, but I would be happy to try.
We can do that. Had to play Benk last year, so it's actually it's a very frustrating thing sometimes when you're on the media team, because it's great fun. I love it, but at the same time you're watching games and you kind of want to play at the same time. You feel that. Do you find that, Mirek? That like you.
That's
You
exactly
feel
what I
that-
find, Guy. But now I'm thinking about you actually, because I was watching some other people's games and it was nice to watch, even though I wanted to play from time to time. But you were watching your son's games, if I.
Yes,
Right.
I was. Well, I was watching one game, which Luke was in.
Were you nervous then?
Nervous, probably not the right word. I don't think he had any huge aspirations. He wanted to do as well as he could. He's aware that there's strong players here. He came for the experience as much as anything else. So I wasn't nervous. But as the game progressed, I did get a bit of a knot in my stomach. I found it very difficult not to be partisan, obviously. I was willing him to make certain moves, and he made some of them and didn't make others, and
You need to work on your telepathy.
yeah. Well, yes, electronic devices. And
I was usually watching the games, and at the beginning of the tournament it's quite easy because the players are spread all around, and my job is anyway to walk around the tournament room and make sure everything is okay. Closer to the end of the tournament, the top games on the top tables are more interesting a little bit. They are in the front, so I tend to forget about the back of the tournament room. But still, even in the back of the tournament room, we have some issues, such as a player is timing out. You have to really watch him because he has the last few seconds on the clock. He makes the board messy. He misflips. His opponent is as nervous as the person having just a few last seconds, and that can happen on table 25, and you just need to be there at table 25, and at the same time you miss all the fun on table 1.
right. And so that actually happened in this tournament, didn't it? It's one of the where you referred to situations that you resolved.
It actually happens on this tournament, and it happens most often around table 10 to 20.
Right.
So the players who are not the very top, but also not at the bottom, so it's fairly good expert players.
We've had a move on the board, so I'm going to shut you up there.
So now it's interesting that there's a hole in H6 where white cannot play anymore, which often means that would be parity for black and the rest of the board. But of course black needs to make sure to not flip that G5 disc, like this disc, by, for example, playing this later in the game, then white can...
Have we got the analysis screen on? Okay, cool.
Okay. Then white could get back here, and then this parity trick won't work anymore. But of course, Yusuke will be careful to not play there.
Ben Seeley is actually pointing out that the discs on the Takanashi Satani game are actually fairly messy, just given what we were talking about. And he kind of comments on it, saying the Japanese players get so much tournament experience that they don't seem to be so concerned with centering the discs. I'm not sure that's true. I think my games can look that messy very easily.
That was actually the only issue we were solving during the tournament. It took a delay of about 20 minutes for the whole tournament, because a player had 30 seconds on his clock. Only 30 seconds for some 6-8 moves, something like that. Not enough time. and by flipping the discs, he made the board messy. And now the question is, what is messy? What is messy? Messy is different for every player. Generally, messy means that it is not obvious where each disc belongs on the board.
Right, so it becomes unreadable.
Becomes unreadable, and a player can claim it's unreadable. On the other hand, we see many games where the board is totally unreadable, but both players still know what's going on. But in our case, it was really unreadable, and a player couldn't see it, couldn't reply his move, so we had to discuss.
Should we have a look at the possible moves for black now? What strikes me as very interesting is G3. Can we see the board, please? Because white doesn't have access to D1 or G4 on F1, so white's option would really be limited after this move. White is likely to play E1, and then black can just follow with G4. And there's also
white can reply H3, and he kept the parity on the right side. Is it correct?
Also the diagonal control. So there are some advantages of that sequence for white. But yeah, it's very interesting. But you have to see all that by looking at this position, though. Alternatively, you could play G4 or E1. How about E1 and B2? Then you would have this Landau coming up. That would be quite cool for black, I think.
Again, don't try that at home. This looks like a disaster on the analysis board now for black, because white has already 2 corners and edges, and everything seems to be white. But there's a logic behind it.
Yeah, the logic behind it is that black takes control of the white move. White can basically only play this move, then this will... Yeah, black has the control and just needs to find a way to get the discs out of this control. This is the position.
Can we have a look at back to the game and the other game, second semifinal game?
Okay.
Yep.
Because this game has come to an end game already, and it's coming to a very nice point where all the, let's say, it's a very standard game. So they filled up the board, and now the corners are empty, and the areas around the corners are free. And I think it's black's turn. Yes, it's black's turn, and here we have very, very nice parity regions. So we have 4 corners, and we have 2 empty squares around one corner, 4 empty squares around the other corner, 6 empty squares around the third corner, and 6 empty squares around the fourth corner. So black's turn to play, and black will have troubles in every of these 4 regions.
On Live Othello, Ben pointed out that like 8 moves ahead, he can see a nice swindle that could be important, but it's quite complicated to figure out the notation. This swept between our live stream and the Live Othello. But I think we should go back to the original game, because
we've got 2 moves.
Oh, something is happening.
So he did indeed play the move that I was suggesting, and then we see a very different response.
G2. Why did he play the X square?
I think he might he might go for the parity that you saw earlier. By if black tries to get access, then white just gets these parity regions again.
So now the obvious move for black would be g4, correct? Looks very, very obvious.
You mean no?
Now in the post-board game position, black's g4 looks very nice, reasonable, quiet move. And if he does it,
or you can even take it away like this.
g1, probably even better.
So it might not be very easy for black to get access to that diagonal.
So essentially,
But
white
after
has taken the main
h3, white
diagonal
has no
from
move.
g2 down to
Now just leave
c6.
it empty.
But
Do
you-
something.
And our
Try to
experts
get
are
the
having a
diagonal.
conversation amongst themselves. So we'll come back to them in a minute. But what they're actually talking about is that main diagonal has been taken. Black doesn't have anything on that diagonal, so cannot go into the h1 corner immediately. However, it doesn't look like white can protect it. It looks like black can get on there by flipping, for example, f1 and g4. Both cut that diagonal. You can do one, even if white takes you off, you can do the other.
It's not that easy.
So the question is, can white keep black off that diagonal? Or if the only way for black to get on to that diagonal gives up more than he actually gains from doing so. And Satani has played
Then you have to
g2, so he will have considered all of these things before he played it. And we hadn't registered it as a potential move when we were thinking about it before. So Maciej and Mirek are having a conversation, and we'll see whether they think it can be protected or not in a second.
I know, what did you do?
Yeah, you can do this one. But oops. So where would you start?
You were trying this move?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go to the analysis board.
But will you kind of look at it and then show what you're thinking rather than look ahead
Yeah.
on it?
Alright, so Matthias, you were playing this move and then?
Well, if black still wants to get access here, they would play g4, and then white could take it away again with d1.
That's a beautiful
Okay,
move.
so-
I like this, that's a beautiful one.
Okay, so we're in essentially what we've done on the analysis board is we played f1 to cut the diagonal. So if you go
Let's
back,
show it again.
we'll say what's going on as you do it. So black plays f1 to cut the diagonal at f3, giving him access to the corner. However, white takes it away with h3,
Three.
and white now has the diagonal again. Black cuts it again by playing g4 and getting the f3 disc again and cutting it. However, white can take it away again by playing d1, and now white is off the diagonal again, and
Can
Now
still get
black can cut it again.
black can cut it again at
Right,
e1.
And
And-
that's it.
but-
White cannot go back to...
Right, so white can't get that one anymore, but he can grab the other diagonal, so other interesting things start happening.
No,
I'm not saying that's a good move, but I mean...
Unfortunately,
it's-
this doesn't work because of the Landau.
Right, okay, so there's a swindle. Okay, so take it back because we've gone a bit too far, but...
But it's beautiful how the struggle for the f3 disc can go back. It's beautiful how the struggle for this disc can go far.
Mm.
And it can go so far that it turns into a fight for the b2 square.
And the most important for Tetsu is that he gets parity out of this, and that the hole in h6 is not going to be the deciding factor for black to get parity everywhere.
Okay, that needs a little bit of explanation as well. the hole at h6 looks like white can't play in there. And if white can't play in there, black can play out the rest of the board, which is now odd, getting the last move, and then black can play in there at the end, getting that last move as well. But what Matches is saying is that doesn't quite work. And the reason it doesn't work is because at some point, black will need to play h4, and as soon as h4 is played, h6 becomes available to white. So he cannot use that square. Trivially, it's not a trivial use of that square for black to gain parity.
So I just have a comment from the YouTube comment chat as well. And I think that our commenters are getting quite excited about the Othello game and speaking quite quickly. So I'm just reminding you to speak a little bit slower for some of our viewers, just so that they can follow along with all of your great insights on the game.
Okay.
That's mostly for you, Guy, I think.
What, being excited and talking quickly?
Yes, exactly.
I'm the one who's trying to clarify what the experts are saying. Okay.
No.
Oh, sorry. Yes, what I also like about the F3 discs that black will not try to get is that we are watching one line, starting with F1, but we can also start not with F1, let's go back, but with G4. Black can take back by D1.
Or H3.
Or H3, which would
Yes.
open this parity
Yes,
region
black
again.
can take back with F1 and white can take back with H3, and we basically did the same moves as in the line before, so
But
the
you don't
position
have
is pretty much the same,
except-
but except for the E2 disc, except for one disc
which is
makes
important
the
because you cannot
huge
take
difference.
Right, so I used to say that again, the E2 disc. So we were talking about the pairs of moves that cut the diagonal and then took the diagonal back and then cut the diagonal and then took the diagonal back again. And one thing, as you're learning to play Othello, is you might look at pairs of moves, and sometimes it's crucial the order that you play those pairs of moves. So you might say to yourself, well, I can cut and then they'll take back, and I can cut and they'll take back. But sometimes the order in which you do them makes a difference. In this case, what Mirek's pointing out is there's one disc which would be different if we played out the pairs in the other order. And you've changed the board. What are you doing? Okay, so what he's saying is instead of doing F1 first, we do G4 first, and then that's followed up by H3, and then do the F1 move. Is this what you're saying?
Yes. That's
Okay,
what
so
I'm
do
saying.
the F1 move. So, and that's followed
We are
up
still
with
fighting for the F3 disc.
the D1 move, which gets the diagonal back again. The D2 disc was black in the other line,
Yes.
and it's white in this line. And why is that significant?
Why is that significant? This E2 disc can be black or white because black now has, in any case, he can go to E1, but if in this case on the board he would flip the E4 discs on that diagonal we're trying to get to. In case E2 was black, he would not be able to flip it, so it wouldn't give him
So
much.
next two moves are played. Now there's lots of interesting moves, I guess, like the F1 that we said to get access to the diagonal. G1 is an option because it doesn't flip any in the G column.
It's also worth looking at the clocks now, because Yusuke Takanashi is down to 1 minute 11 seconds. So
And
he's
he's got to think this through, how to use the many moves he has at his disposal.
Yeah.
and he has a very good clock awareness, so he will finish the game, but he doesn't want to put himself under so much pressure that he makes an error of judgment at a time when he still needs to think, like happened in the Takahashi game. It wasn't a huge judgment error, it just meant he had to think.
It's also interesting that
Let's just comment to the second game because it just finished. So can we switch to the second game for a few seconds?
Akahiro won 35-29.
In the end game, it looked like White had the parity easily, but Black simply has more discs, and that's what you need to do in Othello. So in the second game, Akihiro Takahashi just won, meaning that he's got 1 point in the semifinals, and yes, we'll see what happens in the next game.
So let's go
But
back
if we
to
could stay on the main board from now to the end,
Yeah.
because it's quite likely that the moves are going to come in a flurry. Takanashi has been looking at the board. He's got 51 seconds left. He needs to play his moves quickly, but he's also thought about what his moves are going to be. So there will be very little time between moves.
Interesting that the third row is only one disc, and that disc is likely to be flipped again, as we discussed earlier. That leaves no option to play B8, B7.
7.
Like this won't work, as we saw earlier, because White can just take it, and Black doesn't have access to A3, missing access to A3.
Why White doesn't just play D1 as fast as possible?
What?
Why doesn't Tetsu? Why doesn't he just play D1 as fast as possible to give Yusuke some hard time?
Maybe this is a parity move.
Matthias just pointed. We are watching the main board, so Matthias just pointed out that G1
Okay.
was possible,
So
but D1 was played. E1 replied. So White took the north edge. Black does have access on that diagonal we were fighting for, so Black can do H1 right now.
I think Black might play A3 soon. Yep. And that's a nice parity.
Very soon.
That's a nice parity, because White will take it, and White doesn't have access to B7, so Black can just wait and play on this side and get a swindle out of this.
That seems it's happening right now.
Okay, yep.
So this is a good example of Black getting the last move in the region when he shouldn't really get it. So
It's going to be a close end game because White has a lot of discs.
The last White move is only taking 3 discs.
yeah, it's Black. So there we have it, the result for the Takanashi Satani
34
first
for Yusuke.
semi-final, 34 to Black.
Close.
Yeah. And so we will take a quick break now, but we will be back for the second game of the semi-finals shortly.